All I know is that I would like Azir nerfed, and I like Azir, Rek'Sai, a little bit of Viktor, a little bit of Taliyah, but that's not gonna happen. I already know. And what else? Maybe a little bit of Braum nerfs, but generally, I am just targeting champions that I feel like are really oppressive in their respective roles. So I think Rek'Sai is super good, for instance. But if Rek'Sai gets nerfed, I guess Gragas just takes the place of getting like first picked every game. Anyways, we'll see what the patch notes are. Patches of the grab bag, good stuff all around. A broad assortment of changes. Rise update leads us off. Brand new ulti. Okay, cool. Anyways, there's a new Rise thing. I'm not going to talk about new champion changes that come in on patches because I feel like it's just better for me to break down overall patch changes. So, Leona's been seeing a lot of decent amount of play recently. Actually, her win rate's pretty high when I went to go check the other day before. Surprisingly, I think it's because they made stuff more consistent. So what did they do for this? In high level play, Leona, what happens is it's one dimensional. You can only go in, and typically it means it's really easy to counter gank. So you have to play around Leona, which is not a bad thing because essentially that's what happens in a lot of like top lane bruiser matchups. It's just Leona really warps the game sometimes to where you have to play around her because if she can't go in or she can't pressure to go in, she's actually just a moving like body. So what does it do? Passive damage decreased at all ranks. Okay. The damage of Q decreased. Oh wow, the cooldown goes down to 5 seconds, and there's an increase in bonus range. Okay, and then the Q got nerfed because last patch it used to be 1.25 seconds. They accidentally did that. Now it is actually 1.2 or just 1 second. Eclipse damage got lowered. So all the damage got lowered on the champion. Where did they compensate? Oh, the root duration for Zenith Blade increase is actually really good because sometimes if you E them, you're not guaranteed the Q immediately. And I mean you are, but the duration is very short. Like you get a very small window. And I like this change because honestly, I feel like Leona's play pattern should be very consistent. If you land the E, you can just Q in, and it's up to them to try to break the pattern or like space out well. And I think if you do land the E, you should be rewarded with the Q. And so this is really cool. Damage got lowered by 100. After Solar Flare, Leona gains Incandescence for 5 seconds. During the time, Leona's next 3, 4, 5 autos gain 100 range and deal bonus magic damage and apply Sunlight. Really? Huh. Well, they took away a lot of her power in her early lane and switch it to her power on her ulti. I think that's really unique way of doing it. I don't know. Generally, she's gonna do a lot more burst damage. If you get caught in the combo, you're gonna die. I think maybe this new change to E, what happens is you can now E into ulti, because before, if you tried to E into ulti, you weren't guaranteed to hit it unless you cast your ulti before your E touches the target. Now though, if you E, you can probably ulti after the confirm and hit it. I think that opens up another another combo that's consistent in terms of CC. I think this is definitely interesting. It'll make Leona stronger as long as it'll make her better, but she loses her laning ability, which is kind of maybe not that bad. I mean, we'll see. I think having extra range on her autos actually helps out a lot to be able to land this, and so maybe after a cooldown going to 5 seconds, maybe just max Q second, because I know a lot of Leonas have max E. Generally, I think it's a buff for her. We'll see how it works out. I like that they're trying to buff her, though, because she's not seeing much play. Sona is also a champion that doesn't really do very well. Hopefully, more buffs to her. I'm all for buffing underpowered champions in their respective roles, because I really like that. I don't think there's any downside to doing that. It just gives you more options to pick. Each rank of Crescendo reduces Sona's basic ability cooldowns by 20, and it multiplies with CDR. Wait, what? Oh, it doesn't extend any anymore. So positioning matters a lot for this. The aura duration, if you cast the Q and they were in range and then you moved out, they would still keep the buffs, but now it just matters more for her positioning. But she has some insane CDR now, a 4.8 second, and it's also CDR also can apply to it, so you can go down to like what? So it'll be like 3, less than 3 or less. That's crazy. He's actually just spam your keyboard for this. Damage on power chord increased. Damage reduction increased. And damage reduction aura or ratio increased. Wow, she's seeing a lot of buffs. What the heck? Oh, but she's seeing nerfs on her actual abilities. No, she's getting a heal buff too. What? So her damage gets slightly nerfed, but I say that outside of that, everything else got buffed. Non-decaying. Oh, it's non-decaying. And it scales better with ability power. And no, whoa, the duration got doubled? That's so strong, actually. Holy shit. Riot really wanted to bring Sona back in the meta. I think that I don't know if she needed this many buffs. She actually has an insane amount of buffs. Now she scales super well off CDR, and her AP scaling is actually pretty good too. They buffed her AP scaling on 3 different things if you include the move speed, and they doubled the duration that she increases. So I think they want her to be competitive. They want her to be able to contest strong picks like Karma, Soraka, and I think maybe they went overboard with it, but I guess we'll see where it goes, because I think Sona's not in a great spot. Like, you just hook her and she dies, or you like thresh hook her and she dies. You catch her with a snare, she dies. She's very squishy, and she doesn't super scale well into mid or late game. But I definitely think this is a very large change and buff to her. Tibbers is a less dumb bear if Tibbers enters Fog of War, the bear chases. He doesn't forget how to attack if it's crowd controlled. Okay, so it just makes sure the AI is better. That's cool. It's a buff, but it's very small. Oh, so Azir. This is a really interesting champion. So when I think of Azir, I think of 2 ways to nerf him. I would like to see his mobility decreased in one way or the other. I think him being able to escape at 1300 range is pretty insane, and I also think his ability to initiate at that range is pretty nuts too. But I'm more okay with the initiation range being longer than the escape range if it's possible to make it like that. But I don't think it is. Alternatively, I talked to Medius about this, and he thinks that if Azir has less wave clear, like let's say his soldiers do less damage, or his Q does less damage to the wave, so he has to take risks. If he runs up and tries to just shove the wave nonstop, you have an opening of a couple seconds to hit him. Where right now, if he tries to do that, the opening is literally like 2 seconds, and he just kills the whole wave and he runs away. That's pretty impossible to counter like wave clear, and so those are 2 changes I think would be cool on Azir. I don't know what they did. Let's see. Notice I didn't talk about damage. I think his damage is super good too. But we'll see what they did. So soldier damage scales worse from levels 1 to 11. So he's got weaker soldiers early. Wow. 100. Okay, so their way was nerfing soldier damage, so that kind of dips into the one thing where he can't wave clear as easily, and this also makes it so that he can't just he lowers some of his damage scaling early game, so he has a bigger window for you to take advantage of him. I think that's okay. Like I would like to see any Azir nerf, and this is definitely I think a decent nerf. I like stuff like this. This is maybe not the way I would have done it, but I think that's fairly reasonable. Fiora, passive heals more, Q scaling increased at early levels. I think Fiora's in a good spot right now. She sees a lot of competitive play. She's used as a counter pick against Shen, but she doesn't really take over the Shen matchup till like 2 or 3 items. Generally, I feel like she has her role. She can tank bust pretty well, and she's just good as a bruiser. But what did they do with her instead? Instead, they increased her early Q scaling, so she scales better. Wow, that's a lot. 0.4 increase early. Oh, it's because each level gave her 0.15. So I mean, opening deep blade is going to give her Q a lot more damage. It's like 6 more damage. It's not a really big change. Vital hits. Honestly, these buffs help her a little bit, very small amount. I don't think they're going to do anything for her. I don't think they need to do anything with her. I think Fiora's in a pretty good spot. A lot of teams are using her as a pocket pick. She may not be as strong as Jax or Aurelia right now, but I think she's able to be played. And if she's able to be played competitively, I feel like that means that generally she's in a fine spot as it is. And I don't think these do too much for her. Illaoi, oh wow, please don't buff her again. Riot has this weird thing where they just keep buffing Illaoi because I think that she's got buff like 4 patches in a row, and it's really scary because if she sees any more buffs, she could be god mode. She's already very, very strong in lane and struggles in team fights. Q indicator is more accurate for the enemy. Okay, so it makes it so that you can tell what she Qs. That's a very, very tiny nerf. No big deal for Illaoi. Lee Sin, W shield. Safeguard shield is pretty flimsy even at max rank. We're giving you a healthy buff to give allies a real chance of survival when Lee makes a clutch play. I think Lee is very weak right now. He's a very, very fun champion to play, but he tends to be outscaled and outpressured by all the other junglers because he can't farm that well. He has playmaking ability, but he also scales poorly as well. So he gets just ran over by all the really, really strong junglers. Stuff like Rek'Sai, Gragas, Graves. Lee can maybe... No, he can't really match Nidalee. So Nidalee are all four junglers that just like outpace him really, really hard. I think that this really does nothing for him early game, which is where he kind of has his problem. But I understand buffing Lee Sin's early game is very, 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 very hard. So instead, they're going to try to buff more of his late game and make maxing W a better alternative, or more appealing alternative. I think that this is cool. It's just 80 extra base on his shield at level 5, and that's a pretty decent buff. It's not going to do anything for Lee, but I'm sure Lee players are just going to be happy about it. Lux. So Lux, after her W nerf, saw almost 0 play. I don't think she's very good after it, and so what did they do in exchange? They buffed her passive damage. It's up about 46 at max rank. Probably doesn't do too much, and her Lux binding got nerfed. Okay, so it makes it so that if you can proc Illumination multiple times, you're going to be doing more damage, especially at later ranks. I think that's fine, but it won't change her relative play rate. She's still, I think, not that great of a champion. I think if you're looking for a poke champion, it's better to go something like Azir or Viktor. And if you want a more lane dominant champion, like Taliyah is up your alley. I just don't really think this changes much for Lux. It's nice, I guess, but it doesn't really do anything. It's like the Fiora buffs. Malzahar move speed and attack range down. Attack range down? Ooh, the move speed, I can understand. It's reasonable, you know. He tends to be able to show out and roam a lot. The attack range is a really big nerf. If you can ask bot lane players, but attack range is like the difference between you winning matchups and losing matchups. Like any support having 625 range before it got nerfed was why Annie was such a strong bot lane. But having a 50 attack range nerf in mid lane is pretty brutal. I think it's okay for Malzahar, but it makes his laning a little bit harder. He'll probably still see an okay amount of play, but attack range is such a weird thing to nerf. I would have preferred if they nerfed like his ulti cooldown scaling. I think going from 30 to 6 is kind of crazy, or the damage reduction part of the ulti of the passive. Sorry. And then maybe like hit even the CDR on his Q. 4-second Q on max rank with max CDR seems pretty crazy. But instead they nerfed his attack range. I don't think... I think that's just not what I would have done. Poppy. Passive cooldown. Poppy's not in a good spot right now. I think that Maokai's still playable as a tank, and so is Shen. And that's really the only tank tops that are seeing any play. Poppy got nerfed a lot, and because of that, he's not seeing almost any play. And so did Echo. So what's the thing now? They buff her passive. Oh, wow. They buffed her passive scaling to 20% of her max health. Isn't that insane? That's so much. Okay. And then they made the cooldown shorter too, which is pretty good. And the bonus move speed increases to 40%. They're nice buffs for sure. Especially level 1 steadfast giving 5% more move speed is really nice. Makes it so Poppy scales a little bit better into late game, and that she can find the looks to wallbang a lot easier. I think it's fine. These are nice buffs to Poppy. I don't think she'll immediately start being played a lot more, but they are helpful, certainly. Rek'Sai, W's cooldown on tracking individual targets up. Oh, so instead of ticking every 0.75 seconds, it takes 1.25 seconds. Okay. I think that's cool. It allows you to juke Rek'Sai. That's not necessarily where I would have taken power away from Rek'Sai. I think his ulti cooldown would have been a different method so that he can't dominate the map as hard as he does, or maybe even like some of his base damage, so that you'd have to go more AD if you want to be able to do faster clear or do more damage. But it's okay. I don't think this is going to make him less played. I just think that he's still super strong. Taliyah. W cooldown and cast lock removed. Okay, so let me talk about Taliyah a little bit. I think Taliyah was an above average champion, and then they buffed her Q to give her 50% more damage to lane minions. I think off of that buff, it gave her so much lane control because she's able to one-shot the backline at level 1 Q, one-shot the front line at like level 7 or 5 Q, and it just allows her to control the lane and roam so well. It's the same thing as Malzahar. Like, her play pattern is very okay, though. She can Q, and you can't walk in front of her Q because she'll just hit you with 2 Qs and auto for Thunderlords. If she hits you with all 4, it does like 400 damage to you. I think that buff was what made her too powerful because it gave her too much control of the lane. And not a lot of people caught on early, especially pros, because one, the champion itself takes a lot of games to master. So she probably at least 20 games. I think Xenon, the maker of the champion, said her win rate really differed once it approached 40 games. And I think that's relatively long, but I mean, he has the stats to back it up. So I would trust him in that regard. And but yeah, pros play on a patch behind, and you have to invest a lot of games into her. And I think after they realized how good she was, you're going to see Taliyah everywhere, like in both the LCSs, and the Taliyah players are only going to get better with the more games they put in. Because like this week, Bjergsen played godlike Taliyah, Jensen played an okay one, and then like the Froggen and Pobelter Taliyah, not too great. But going on to more weeks in LCS, you will see better and better play, and people are going to start to realize that she is just super strong. I think she kind of replaces Twisted Fate's job in the current meta right now. She's essentially Twisted Fate with less consistent roam gank potential because she doesn't have point and click stun, but it's much stronger laning phase. And I think that's kind of her fit in the meta at the moment. This is kind of interesting. They actually gave her a buff to her W, which is pretty. They nerfed the cooldown to compensate, but what happens is when you can now W into E, and that's the most important thing, because it allows you to create very, very fluid combos. Before you had to E and then W, but now if you can like eyeball that your W is going to hit and you throw out the E instantly, you're able to make a more consistent damage patterns, and because of that, they ended up nerfing a lot of her damage and her cooldown to compensate. I think that this makes her way more fluid, and it's going to be scary because she's going to do a ton of damage and still have a lot of lane control. She's definitely one of the strongest mid laners in the game right now. Yeah, you're going to see a lot of this champion. I think moving on, if they do want to nerf her, I would definitely hit the Q damage increase onto the creeps. I don't think any champion should have that much pushing power early. And like Malzahar's pushing power isn't really that good till he gets like first or second buy and items. And the same is for Azir. Viktor at least needs 1,000 gold to push, but Taliyah can literally push at any level because her Q damage does so much. I think like 50% to 20 or 50% to 30% is a good way to make her still have Q that could shove, but not shove insanely hard. Kind of lower her actual damage to creeps. Anyways, let's keep going. Viktor. So I think Viktor is actually super good because he can wave clear so early. The biggest problem is at level 7, or your first back is 1,000 gold, level 7, you just wave clear the back range minions instantly, and he does super high amounts of damage. So nerfing either of his damage or his wave clear is a really, really good way to deal with Viktor. And this way they decided that nerfing his first upgrade is, and then buffing his last upgrade is how they're going to nerf it. I think that's a very interesting change. I like it. I like it a lot. It means that you can, if you can pressure Viktor to back, and he doesn't have 1250 gold, which is a lot of gold, by the way. That's a large rod worth of gold. It sometimes is hard to get that much gold. He can't wave clear perfectly. This is actually a pretty big nerf to him. I like what they did with this for sure. It's good. Yasuo. Okay, I think Yasuo is. Let me not read the notes. I think Yasuo is a weak champion because he has low base stats. So typically, to be able to beat champions, you have to just play one-on-one and slowly whittle them down and like outplay them slowly. But what usually happens when you play with Yasuo is that the jungler camps you and you go 0-10. And it's probably the most consistent thing I've been able to do that, because it's even worse than champions like Vayne, because Vayne can start like 0-5, 0-7, stuff like that, but Yasuo will actually go 0-10 because his play pattern to actually win the lane requires you to eat into the enemy team's range to be able to do damage. And because of that, it's very common to see Yasuo's feet out of their mind. So in terms of buffing the champion, I don't necessarily think he needs that many buffs. Like base stat buffs are enough to where I think that's all he needs, because making him any stronger is probably not a great idea. We'll see what they do. Oh, he has a ton of bugs where if you ulti and Q, the Q just does no damage or something like that. So fixing the bugs would be very, very nice. And you can go through wind walls sometimes as well. So fix the bug where Yasuo can be locked out of his basic attack after cast. Okay, that's great. Fix the bug where Yasuo wasn't always critically strike. Okay, that's great. Wind wall no longer fails to project block projectiles in an instant it was cast. If it was cast at the same time Yasuo died. Okay, that's great. It fixed a bug where Sweeping Blade can chain cast on multiple targets without cooldown or cast time if cast while knocked up. Okay, so they just fixed a lot of bugs that Yasuo mains were pretty annoyed with. I think that's fine. They didn't actually buff him. They just made all his play patterns more consistent, which is great. I think that I need so many Yasuos who especially complain about this one, where they just locked out of their basic auto or their Q just misses after their ulti. So it's cool. Cloud Drake. So I think Cloud Drake just needed a small buff to be very good. So right now, what does it do? It's 15, 30, 45. I think if they did 20, 40, 60, Cloud Drake would be fine. Perfectly good. I don't think it needs to be buffed that much. So what are they going to do with Cloud Drake? Now it does 25, 50, 75. So it's even more than originally what I thought they were going to do. And I think that this is really, really good buff. I think now people are going to contest with this a lot more. And Cloud Drake needed to be buffed. For sure, it was the weakest dragon in the game. And I'm really happy with them buffing it. This might be a little bit crazy though. But at least we'll see where it goes from there. I'm down to see people start contesting for Cloud Drakes. And I'm down for my solo queue games to see people actually care about these things. Because when I see this, as a jungler, I don't even do Cloud Drake. I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to go gank rather than leave this up. And I think if you're able to secure multiple clouds now, 75 out of the combat is actually very interesting. Very high amount. Of course, I think sometimes will force your character to hit the soft cap on your move speed. The first one, which I think happens at like 415 or 420, which might be a little bit annoying, but I think that's a very, very small problem. I think that I like the way that it's done. I don't care about Twisted Tree Line. I'm sorry, I don't play Twisted Tree Line, so I can't really make any kind of good analysis on this, on any of this. Uh, this is all Twisted Tree Line? Okay, then we're gonna keep going. So, Swan Center request, cooldown pings. Oh, this is super nice. So I don't know if anyone's ever played Overwatch, but if you press the button Z in Overwatch, it tells your team, automatically relates to your team the percentage of your cooldown where it is. So if you want to try to make big plays with your team, what you could do is you can just tell them how much mana you're missing. Like being able to tell them the charge rate is really helpful because it lets your teammates visualize, if they could read it, when to expect an ulti. And I think that in this game, it's really nice to be able to have cooldown pings as well. So I can tell them, oh, I'm 4 mana away from my ability, or my ulti is up in 5 seconds. And if I do that constantly, it changes the way that the game is played, because it gives your teammates nice information so they can be able to make plays. So even though we don't get voice chat, it allows you to be able to communicate with your team better, which is great. Super, super good. Champion Mastery. This makes it so supports will now be able to hit S's and S pluses instead of A, B, and C's. So this is great because I've been in the support role before where I just get B's or A's. And it's even with like really perfect support ratings. And so now that assists are more toward or similar to gold or similar to kills for a system, I expect supports to see a lot of S's and S pluses. Cool. Awesome. I don't care about Nexus Siege. And I don't mind any of this. And upcoming skins, I don't care about any of this. So all this stuff, overall the patch seems pretty good. I worry about the giving Taliyah more relative power, and I'm worried about giving Rek'Sai not enough nerfs. But I think that generally everything, like the patch hit a lot of problem areas, especially along the lines of like Azir, whatchamacallit. At least they tried to nerf Rek'Sai. I'll give them that. And Azir and Viktor being nerfed are like the really two big ones. And as a mid laner, that's very helpful. I think this Sona buff is insane, and this Leona buff is kind of crazy too. So I think if you're playing support, you should try out both these champs. They're very, very, very interesting now. I'm certainly going to try out both. Anyways, that's it for my 6.14 patch note review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I am going to play some ads, and I'll see you guys in 2 minutes.